Picture this. It's 1924, a small kitchen in Harlem. The window is cracked open just a little. Cold air sneaks in. But inside, something is cooking, something that smells like home. A woman stands over a tiny stove. She's tired. She worked all day cleaning someone else's house, but now she's making something her mother taught her. Something from the island. She closes her eyes. For just a moment, she's not in New York anymore. She's back home. And the food? It's the only thing that takes her there. This is the story of Caribbean immigrants in 1920s New York. They came with hope. They came with almost nothing. But they brought their food, and that food kept them alive. It kept them connected. It kept them human. These 25 dishes aren't just recipes. They're survival, they're memory, they're love cooked into every bite. And some of them you've probably never heard of. But by the end of this, you'll understand why they mattered so much. Let's step into that kitchen. Let's taste what they tasted. Let's remember what they couldn't forget. 1. Saltfish with boiled green bananas. Saltfish was the backbone, the foundation, the thing that kept families alive when there was nothing else. It came in wooden crates from the docks, hard as a rock, salty as the ocean itself. But it lasted forever. And that mattered when you didn't know where your next meal was coming from. You soaked it overnight, sometimes for 2 nights if it was really salty. The salt pulled out into the water, and the next day you boiled it with green bananas. Not sweet yellow ones, green ones, starchy, firm. They filled you up. This meal was simple, but it was powerful. It reminded people of Saturday mornings back home, of their grandmother's hands breaking apart the fish, of the smell of the sea. In Harlem, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, this dish showed up on tables every single week. Some people ate it for breakfast, some people ate it for dinner, and some people ate it twice a day because it was all they could afford. But nobody complained, because it was theirs. It was home. And home was something you didn't let go of. 2. Callaloo with coconut milk. Callaloo was the leafy green that stretched everything. You could find it in the markets if you knew where to look. Sometimes it was fresh, sometimes it was wilted, but it didn't matter. You took it home. You washed it 3 times. You chopped it up, and you simmered it with coconut milk, onions, and a little bit of salt. And suddenly you had a pot of something warm, something that felt like medicine for your soul. Mothers fed this to their children when money ran out. Boarding house cooks made big pots of it to feed 10 people at once. The coconut milk made it rich, made it creamy, made it taste like the Caribbean sun was still shining on you, even in the middle of a New York winter. And when you took that first spoonful, you remembered your mother, your grandmother, the house you grew up in. This dish saved lives in a quiet, steady way. It kept people going, 1 spoonful at a time. 3. Breadfruit stew. Breadfruit wasn't easy to find in New York. It wasn't like the islands where it grew on trees. In New York, breadfruit was rare, special, almost sacred, so when a shipment came in, word spread fast. Neighbors told neighbors, people lined up, they waited, they bought it, and they took it home like it was gold. Because in a way it was. It was a piece of the island, a piece of home. And then they made stew. They cut the breadfruit into chunks. They simmered it in tomatoes, onions, and whatever spices they had left. The breadfruit turned soft. It soaked up all the flavor, and it fed a family for 2 days. This wasn't the breadfruit they roasted over open flames back home. This was the New York version, the survival version, the version you made when you missed home so much it hurt, and every bite reminded you that even though you were far away, you still knew how to make something beautiful. 4. Rice and red peas. Rice and peas was supposed to have meat, salt pork, maybe a little chicken, but in the 1920s, meat was expensive, so people made it without. They cooked the rice in coconut milk, they added the red peas, a little thyme, a little pepper, and that was it. No meat. But it still tasted like home. It still felt like Sunday. This dish showed up on Sunday tables. It showed up after church. It showed up when families gathered in tiny apartments and pretended just for an hour that everything was okay. The coconut milk made it rich. The peas made it filling. And the memory? That made it sacred. Women would spend their last dollar on coconut milk for this dish, because some things you don't give up, some things you hold on to no matter what. And rice and peas? That was one of them. But here's the thing. Some of these dishes weren't just about survival. Some of them were about joy. And the next one? It brought smiles to the hardest days. 5. Fried flying fish cakes. Flying fish cakes were magic. They were small, they were crispy, and they were made from scraps. Fishermen at the docks sold flying fish for almost nothing. People took them home. They mixed the fish with flour, onions, and a little pepper. They shaped them into little cakes, and they fried them in hot oil until they turned golden brown, until the kitchen filled with that smell, that incredible, beautiful smell. These weren't fancy, but they were delicious. Kids loved them. They begged for them. Workers bought them on the street. They ate them on the way to the factory. They ate them on the way home. And every single bite tasted like the ocean. Like freedom. Like something good in a world that often felt too hard. The outside was crispy, crunchy. The inside was soft, flaky. And the flavor? It was bright. It was fresh. It reminded you that good things still existed, that joy was still possible, even when everything else was falling apart. These fish cakes became a symbol of making something special out of almost nothing, of refusing to let poverty kill your spirit, of finding reasons to smile. And that mattered more than you can imagine. 6. Pumpkin soup. Pumpkin soup was thick, so thick you could stand a spoon in it. Boarding house landladies made huge pots of this. They fed it to 10, 15, 20 people at a time. It was cheap. Pumpkins were easy to find, big orange ones, heavy. You carried them home, and they felt like you were carrying something important, something that mattered. You simmered them with onions, a little coconut milk if you had it, and whatever spices were left in the cupboard. You let it cook for hours. The pumpkin broke down, turned soft, melted into the liquid, and it became this beautiful golden soup that tasted like comfort, that tasted like someone cared about you. This soup wasn't just food, it was warmth. After a 12-hour shift in a factory, after cleaning someone else's home, after being treated like you didn't matter, you came home to this. And for a few minutes you felt warm, you felt cared for, you felt like you mattered. The soup filled your belly. But it also filled something deeper, something in your heart. It reminded you that you weren't alone, that someone was thinking about you, that someone made sure you had something hot to eat. And in the cold, lonely streets of 1920s New York, that meant everything. 7. Saltfish fritters. Saltfish showed up again, but this time it was different. This time it was fried. People mixed saltfish with flour, a little baking powder, onions, and pepper. They dropped spoonfuls into hot oil, and they fried them until they puffed up and turned golden. These fritters were sold on street corners. They were cheap, they were filling, and they were addictive. You couldn't eat just one. You could eat 3 and feel full for hours. Workers bought them in the morning. Kids begged for them after school, and every single person who ate one remembered the first time they tasted it back home. It was a little piece of the island, fried up and handed to you in a napkin. Women made them on Friday nights, sold them on Saturday mornings, and used the money to pay rent. These fritters fed families, literally. And speaking of survival foods, the next one might surprise you, because it's simpler than anything you've seen so far. 8. Boiled yam with oil drizzle. Boiled yam was the simplest thing in the world. You boiled the yam, you drained it, you drizzled a little oil on top, maybe coconut oil, maybe palm oil if you could find it, and that was it. No sauce, no meat, no vegetables, just yam and oil. And somehow it was enough. People ate this before work. 4 in the morning, still dark outside. They ate it because it gave them energy, real energy, the kind that lasted, the kind that got you through a 12-hour shift lifting boxes or scrubbing floors. They ate it after work, too, when they were too tired to cook anything else, when their hands hurt, when their feet ached, when all they wanted was something simple. It filled you up, it gave you strength, and it reminded you that even the simplest things could keep you going. In the islands, yam was everywhere. You took it for granted. In New York, it was a luxury. You had to search for it, pay more for it. But when you had it, you honored it. You didn't waste a single bite. You cut it carefully. You ate every piece. And you felt grateful. Grateful that you could still taste something from home. Something real. Something that connected you to where you came from. 9. Stewed okra and tomatoes. Okra wasn't just Caribbean, it was Southern, too. And in New York, the two worlds met. People bought okra from the markets, little green pods. Some people hated the texture, called it slimy, but others loved it, craved it, needed it. They stewed it with tomatoes, onions, and a little bit of pepper. They let it cook low and slow, until everything melted together. It turned soft, it turned thick, and yes, it was a little slimy. But that didn't matter, because it tasted like home. It tasted like gardens and sunshine and grandmothers cooking in outdoor kitchens. It tasted like Saturday afternoons and laughter and belonging somewhere. This dish showed up at potlucks. It showed up at church suppers. It showed up when someone needed to stretch a meal to feed more people. You made a big pot. You invited neighbors. You shared. And every time someone tasted it, they remembered. They remembered their mother, their grandmother, the kitchen they grew up in, the voices they used to hear every day, and for just a moment, they felt whole again. They felt like they hadn't lost everything, like some part of home was still with them, still alive, still real. 10. Coconut bread. Coconut bread was baked once a week. Maybe on Sunday, maybe on Saturday night when the kitchen finally cooled down. It was dense, it was heavy. You could feel the weight of it in your hands. And it lasted. That was the point. One loaf fed a family for days. You sliced it thin, you made it stretch. You treated every slice like it mattered. You ate it with tea. You ate it with butter if you had it. You ate it plain if you didn't. And it was always good, always satisfying. The coconut gave it sweetness, just enough, not too much, just enough to make you feel like you were eating something special, something worth remembering. This bread wasn't soft and fluffy like the bread from the bakery. It was solid, it was real, it had substance, and it carried the sweetness of coconut in every bite. Women traded slices with their neighbors. They brought it to church. They wrapped it in cloth and saved it for special moments. And every time someone bit into it, they tasted home. They tasted their grandmother's kitchen. They tasted mornings back on the island. And they remembered why they were fighting so hard to survive. Because this bread, this simple, beautiful bread, was proof that beauty still existed. That tradition still mattered. That they hadn't lost who they were. 11. Cassava pone. Cassava pone was strange. It wasn't quite a dessert. It wasn't quite a meal. It was somewhere in between. You grated cassava. You mixed it with coconut, sugar, and spices. You baked it until it turned dark and dense, and then you sliced it. Some people ate it for breakfast. Some people ate it for dessert. But everyone ate it. Everyone loved it. This was the dish that showed up at celebrations, at birthdays, at weddings. At any moment when people wanted to feel a little bit of joy. It was sweet, it was filling, and it reminded people that even in hard times there was still room for something special. Kids would sneak extra slices, adults would save pieces for later. And everyone agreed that cassava pone was worth every bit of effort it took to make, because it wasn't just food, it was celebration, it was hope. But not every meal was about celebration. Some were about pure survival. And the next one? It kept people alive when there was almost nothing left. 12. Rice water with nutmeg. Rice water was what you drank when you had no money for food. You boiled rice. You saved the water. You added a little nutmeg, a little sugar if you were lucky, and you drank it. It wasn't filling, but it was something. It gave you a little energy, it warmed your stomach, and it got you through the morning. That was all it had to do. Mothers gave this to their children before school. Workers drank it before heading to the docks. And it became a symbol of doing whatever it took to keep going. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it mattered. People didn't talk about drinking rice water. It was shameful. It meant you were struggling. But everyone did it at some point. Everyone had a week where rice water was breakfast, and they survived. They kept going. And that's what counted. 13. Pepper pot stew. Pepper pot was supposed to have meat, lots of meat, but in New York, people made it without. They used cassava, the dark syrup made from cassava. They added vegetables. They added whatever they could find, potatoes, carrots, maybe some cabbage, and they simmered it for hours. The cassava turned everything dark and rich, and even without meat it tasted deep. It tasted complex. This stew was passed around at community gatherings. People brought pots of it to share, and every single person who tasted it knew what it meant. It meant resilience. It meant creativity. It meant refusing to let go of your culture, even when everything was working against you. The cassava gave it that special flavor, that flavor you couldn't get anywhere else, and that flavor reminded you who you were, where you came from, and why you couldn't give up. 14. Fried plantain slices. Fried plantains were everywhere, but the green ones, those were different. They weren't sweet. They were savory, starchy, almost like chips. You sliced them thin. You fried them until they turned golden and crispy, and you ate them with everything. They were the perfect side dish, the perfect snack, the perfect everything. They went with saltfish. They went with stew. They went with rice. And sometimes you just ate them plain. Kids loved them. Adults loved them. And every single bite reminded you that even the simplest things, when done right, could bring you joy. Street vendors sold them in paper cones. Workers ate them during lunch breaks. And everyone agreed that green plantains, fried crispy and salted just right, were one of life's simple pleasures, even in the hardest times. And joy was important, because the next few dishes, they were all about making do with almost nothing, but still making it taste like something. 15. Split pea soup. Split pea soup was thick, so thick it almost felt like eating stew. You simmered the peas with onions, garlic, and whatever spices you had. You let it cook for hours until the peas broke down and turned into something creamy, something smooth, something that coated your spoon. And then you ate it. You ate bowls of it. Because it was cheap, it was filling, and it lasted for days. This soup showed up in boarding houses, in tenements, in tiny apartments where 3 families shared one kitchen. And it fed everyone. It didn't matter if you had meat. It didn't matter if you had fancy ingredients. The split peas did all the work, and they never let you down. People would make a huge pot on Sunday night and eat it all week long, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And it never got old, because when you're hungry, good food is good food. 16. Salt mackerel with onions. Salt mackerel was another preserved fish. It was smaller than saltfish, but it worked the same way. You soaked it, you sautéed it with onions, and you served it over rice or with boiled vegetables. It was salty, it was strong, and it tasted like the sea, like home, like everything you missed about the islands. People ate this when they were tired of saltfish, when they wanted something a little different. But the truth was, it was almost the same, just a different fish, just a different name, but the same survival, the same memory, the same taste of home. And that's what mattered. The onions sweetened in the pan, the fish flaked apart, and when you ate it, you remembered mornings on the beach, fishermen bringing in their catch, your mother cooking in the kitchen, and for just a moment, you were there again. 17. Cornmeal cuckoo. Cuckoo was cornmeal cooked stiff. You stirred it until your arm hurt, and then you kept stirring, because if you stopped it would get lumpy. Nobody wanted lumpy cuckoo. You stirred with a wooden spoon. You stirred in a figure-8 motion. Your grandmother taught you that. Her grandmother taught her. And now you were doing it in a kitchen in New York. When it was done, it was solid enough to slice, firm, dense. You ate it with sauce, with stew, with gravy. It soaked everything up, and it filled you, really filled you, not just your stomach, but something deeper, because this cuckoo was tradition. It was history. It was your ancestors surviving on this same dish hundreds of years ago. This was the dish people ate when there was no bread, when there was no rice, when there was nothing left but cornmeal, and somehow it was enough, because it was made with care, with tradition, with the knowledge that your ancestors had survived on this same dish. And so would you. You would survive. You would keep going. You would keep stirring. And every time you made cuckoo, every time your arm ached from stirring, you were connected to everyone who came before you, everyone who survived, everyone who refused to give up. And that connection gave you strength, gave you hope, gave you a reason to keep fighting. 18. Boiled dumplings. Boiled dumplings were the simplest thing you could make. Flour and water. That's it. You mixed them together. You shaped them into little balls. You boiled them, and you ate them, sometimes with soup, sometimes with stew, sometimes plain, and they filled you up every single time. They weren't fancy, but they were filling, and in a city where everything cost too much, these dumplings kept people alive. They showed up at every meal, they showed up in every pot, and they became a symbol of making something out of nothing. Kids learned to shape them, rolling the dough between their palms, making them smooth and round, and when they ate them, they felt proud, because they helped make dinner. They contributed, and that mattered. But sometimes even nothing felt like too much to ask for. And that's when the next meal showed up. The meal that told you just how hard things really were. 19. Bread and tea. Supper. Bread and tea was what you ate when there was nothing else, when the money ran out, when the cupboard was bare, when you opened the door and all you saw was emptiness. You buttered a piece of bread if you had butter. Most times you didn't. You dipped it in strong black tea, and that was supper. That was it. No vegetables, no protein, just bread and tea. This wasn't a celebration. This was survival. This was what happened at the end of a long week when the rent was due, when the landlord was knocking, when there was nothing left, and yet people sat together. They dipped their bread, they sipped their tea, and they made it through another night. They talked, they shared stories, they reminded each other why they came to New York in the first place, for a better life, for opportunities, for their children, and even though tonight was just bread and tea, tomorrow might be better, next week might be better, next month might be better. You had to believe that. You had to hold on to that hope, because without it, without that belief that things could change, you wouldn't make it. So you dipped your bread, you drank your tea, and you told yourself that this was temporary, that you were stronger than this moment, that you would survive, and somehow you did. 20. Stewed cabbage with coconut oil. Cabbage was cheap. You could buy a whole head for almost nothing, and with coconut oil you could make it taste like something special. You chopped it up. You sautéed it in coconut oil with onions and pepper, and it turned soft and rich and full of flavor. The coconut oil changed everything, made it taste like home. This dish stretched meals, it filled plates. It made people feel like they were eating something good, even when times were hard. And the coconut oil? That was the secret. That was the taste of the islands. That was the reminder that you were still connected to where you came from. Women would save their coconut oil, use it sparingly. But when they used it on cabbage, it transformed the meal, made it special, made it worth remembering. 21. Banana fritters. Banana fritters weren't always sweet. Sometimes they were savory. You mashed up bananas, the overripe ones, the ones nobody else wanted. the ones with brown spots all over them. You mixed them with flour and a little salt. You fried them until they puffed up and turned golden, and you ate them hot, right out of the pan. These fritters were quick, they were easy, and they used up bananas that were about to go bad. Nothing was wasted, nothing was thrown away. You couldn't afford to throw anything away. Every scrap mattered, every ingredient had value, and these fritters proved it. And every bite tasted like creativity, like refusing to give up, like making something beautiful out of what you had left. The outside was crispy, the inside was soft and sweet from the bananas, and even though they were savory, even though you added salt instead of sugar, they still had that banana flavor, that tropical flavor, that island flavor. And it reminded you where you came from, what you were fighting for, who you were at your core. These fritters weren't fancy, but they were delicious. They were resourceful. They were proof that you could take something everyone else threw away and turn it into something worth eating, worth sharing, worth remembering. 22. Rice and gravy. Rice and gravy was exactly what it sounds like. You cooked rice, you made gravy. And that was the meal. No chicken, no beef, no pork, just gravy. The gravy became the meat, it became the flavor, it became everything, and you convinced yourself it was enough, because it had to be. People made this when payday was still days away, when the cupboard was almost empty, when all you had left was rice and a few vegetables to make gravy. And somehow it worked. It filled you up, it kept you going, and it reminded you that even when you had almost nothing, you could still create something worth eating. The gravy was thin, but it was seasoned well, and when you poured it over rice, it looked like a real meal. And sometimes, looking like a real meal was half the battle. And that's what all of these dishes were about. Creating something, holding on, refusing to let go. But the last few? They hit different. They tell you something about strength you didn't know existed. 23. Saltfish and pumpkin mash. Saltfish and pumpkin mash was soft. So soft it almost melted in your mouth. You boiled the saltfish, you boiled the pumpkin, you mashed them together with a little butter or oil, and that was it. It was warm, it was filling, and it was gentle, easy to eat, easy to digest, easy to love. Boarding house landladies made this for people who were sick, for people who were tired, for people who just needed something easy to eat. Something that didn't require chewing, something that didn't require energy. You just ate it, and it took care of you. The pumpkin was sweet, the saltfish was savory. Together, they created something balanced, something complete, something that felt like someone was taking care of you, like someone was making sure you were okay. And in the cold, harsh streets of 1920s New York, that feeling was rare, that feeling was precious. So, when you ate this mash, when you let it warm you from the inside out, you felt seen, you felt cared for, you felt like you mattered. And that feeling, that simple, beautiful feeling of being cared for, was sometimes the only thing that kept you going, the only thing that reminded you that you were worth fighting for, worth surviving for, worth living for. 24. Sweet potato pudding. Sweet potato pudding was dense. You grated sweet potatoes. Your hands got tired. Your knuckles ached. But you kept grating. You mixed them with coconut sugar and spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, a little ginger if you had it. You baked it until it turned dark and firm, and then you sliced it. It was sweet, it was heavy, and it felt like a celebration. This pudding showed up at Christmas, at Easter, at birthdays, at any moment when people wanted to feel a little bit of joy, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of hope. It reminded them that even in hard times there was still room for dessert, still room for sweetness, still room for tradition. You ate it slowly, you savored every bite, because you knew this was special. This wasn't something you ate every day. This was something you waited for, something you looked forward to, something that made the hard days worth it. And when you tasted it, when that sweetness hit your tongue and those spices filled your nose, you smiled, you closed your eyes, And for just a moment, you were back on the island, at a celebration, surrounded by people who loved you, surrounded by music and laughter and joy. And even though that moment was just in your memory, even though you were really in a cold apartment in New York, it was real. It was yours, and nobody could take it away from you. 25. Leftover stew over bread. Leftover stew over bread was the final meal, the end of the week meal. The nothing left but this meal. You took whatever stew was left, maybe just a cup, maybe just a few spoonfuls. You poured it over bread. The bread soaked up the gravy, it turned soft. It became part of the stew, and it filled you up. This wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was honest. It was the truth of what it meant to survive in 1920s New York as a Caribbean immigrant. You used everything, you wasted nothing, and you made it through. Day after day, week after week, year after year, you made it through. This meal represented everything, all the struggle, all the creativity, all the refusal to give up. You didn't have much, but you had bread, you had a little bit of stew, and you had the knowledge, the deep, powerful knowledge that you could make something out of it, that you could survive, that you could keep going. And so you did. You ate your stew-soaked bread, you filled your belly, and you woke up the next morning ready to do it all over again, because that's what survival looked like. Not glamorous, not easy, but real, honest, and absolutely beautiful in its own way. These 25 dishes weren't just food. They were survival. They were love. They were memory. They were the way Caribbean immigrants in 1920s New York held on to who they were, even when everything tried to take that away. They cooked in tiny kitchens, they fed their families, they shared with their neighbors, and they refused to forget where they came from. Every pot of callaloo, every slice of coconut bread, every bite of saltfish, it all mattered, it all meant something, and it still does. Because food isn't just food, it's connection, it's history, it's the thread that ties us to the people who came before. And when you understand that, when you really understand that, you see these dishes differently. You see them as acts of resistance, acts of love, acts of pure human determination. So the next time you eat something your grandmother made, remember this. Remember that someone, somewhere, fought to keep that recipe alive, fought to pass it down, fought to make sure you could taste it too. And maybe, just maybe, that's worth remembering. That's worth honoring. That's worth sharing. What dish surprised you the most? Drop a comment. And if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Because there are more stories like this. More meals, more memories, more moments that deserve to be told. And I'm going to tell every single one of them.